and for A Fistful of Vinyl here at the Palladium. My guest today is Frank Turner. How you doing, man?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very happy to be at the Palladium.
Yeah.
I've spent my morning looking up some history of this place.
It's been a while.
And yeah, I mean, I learned some facts.
Yeah.
It was designed and built by the same guy Gordon Kaufman, who built the Hoover Dam.
Oh, interesting.
The opening act here was Tommy Dorsey's orchestra with Frank Sinatra. And so I was looking through it all, and like, you know, everybody's played here, Jimi Hendrix, MC5, Prince, Bowie, Stones, all that kind of thing. But like, the thing I'm most excited about today, when I was a kid, my Bible, and I used the word with all the weight that it's supposed to hold, was the book Get in the Van by Henry Rollins.
Okay.
And the front cover shot is the shot of the outside of the Palladium. And I've always wondered where it was, and I suspected it might be here. And it is.
Is this your first time playing it?
Yeah, it's my first time here, so I'm very excited.
Awesome. This is our first time filming in the Palladium.
Okay, well,
we're doing the Palladium. So we have empathy. We can start off with it.
Hooray!
Cool, man. Well, I gotta say, I've been listening to you for a long time. You've been playing you on air for a really long time. It's been really fascinating to see. Very welcome. It's been very fascinating to see kind of like the trajectory that your career has taken. I jumped on about just before anyone Keep My Bones, and there's been such like a stylistic evolution since then.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to get your perspective and sort of retrospective on like where you came from, where you were at the time that those were coming out, and what's kind of changed between then and now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that I think that artists have a duty to evolve and to change, and the weird sort of conservatism that inhabits some music fans, and particularly in the punk rock world, is something I don't really have very much time for. Every time I put anything out, somebody goes, "It's different from the last thing," and I say, "That's the point. That's what I was trying to achieve. Thank you very much." And like. I make a point every night when we play of playing songs from every record, and in a way that's part of how I think about new material. It's like, cool, I don't need to write Still Believe with The Road again because those songs exist, therefore I don't need to do them again. Do you know what I mean? It's just like write new stuff. But I mean, I guess like when I started out playing solo material, I used to be in hardcore punk bands, and then first of all I was really obsessed with kind of country and folk music, but I was also really kind of at pains to distance myself sonically from what I'd done before. So the first few records, there was, in retrospect, I was placing a bit of an internal limitation on myself, kind of trying to not do anything that might sound a bit like my old band because I would clear water. But then by the time we got to, there's a song in Keep My Bones called One Foot for the Other, and that was a bit of a kind of a sort of breakthrough moment, just in the sense that kind of sounds like a Million Dead song. And I just had this thing, I kind of wrote it and was like, am I allowed to do this in my solo album? And then I realised that I can do whatever the fuck I want. So,
hell yeah, I'm going to cover myself.
Yeah, well, just, it's fine to explore any territory, really. And then, after that, I mean, Take That Car was quite a sort of polished record in its way, let's say. But sort of by design, I'll be honest with you, because we're friends now.
Yes, we are.
I have sort of mixed feelings about production on that record. There are days when I love it, and there are days when I think it's a little too kind of clean under the fingernails, if you know what I mean. Positive Songs was an attempt to kind of get away from that and do something much more kind of gritty and raw and live. And we recorded the album in 9 days. We just set up as a band in a room and hammered the songs out one by one, and it was an awesome feeling. And then with the new record, I kind of just wanted to throw every possible thing into the mix and kind of and push my sonic boundaries. I spent a lot of time thinking about a lot of post-punk music at like all angles of that, everything from kind of like Wire and Gang of Four on the one hand through to like Sheffield Scene, Human League and stuff like that too. So the new record is hopefully quite different, but that's for other people to judge more than me.
Certainly, and I have to imagine too there's certain threads that are universal throughout your music. What do you think have been like kind of the most resonant elements from beginning to end?
That's a difficult question for me to answer, is the honest answer to that. Simply because, like, I mean, in a way I'm the wrong person to ask. Maybe I should ask you. Just because, like,
I have an answer.
Okay, well, I'll give my answer and then you give your answer.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the reason I find it a difficult question to answer is because I'm so close to it that any small change feels massive to me. Do you know what I mean? Because like my nose is right up against the TV, if you like, so like every song feels different to me. And particularly with this new record, I mean, one of the things that I was slightly concerned about is that, to me, the new record feels like radically different from anything I've done before. And I spent ages telling everybody that before it came out. And there have been bands that I've been into, and I'm not going to mention any names, who've kind of talked the talk about everything being radically different, and then the record comes out and it's got a slightly different drum sound, and that's it. You know, and I didn't want to fall into that trap. I mean, and then beyond that, I just kind of try and write really directly. I try and sort of be raw and honest in my expression. And you know, and that's why, again, like occasionally people are like compare the albums you made, which is an impossible thing for me to do because each one's so rooted in who I was and where I was and what I was doing.
Absolutely.
That like, you know, compare Love Around Someone Be More Kind. It's just like what? Do you know what I mean? It's like
older?
Yeah, well, quite. I mean, that is kind of the only real answer to the question.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think I could have made each succeeding album without having made the previous ones. There's no way I could have made Be More Kind without having made the 6 records I made before it. But in terms of common threads, I don't really know. I mean, I think you tell me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of did like a Frank Turner crash course over the last week or so to remind myself of all the music I've been listening to anyway every week for the last several years. And I found that one of the couple of the qualities that really stood out is, one, your songs are very autobiographical. They all seem to be very informed by like human experience, like the vulnerability therein, and kind of as an extension of that, like the recognition of the greatness and imperfections that come with being human, and seemed very deliberately forthright with that in a way that kind of, to me, expressed vulnerability and kind of called for empathy from the audience.
I like that.
Yeah,
that's good.
Cool.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, I mean, there's, like, some of my favourite songs that I've written are songs which, if you ask me what they're about, I struggle to come up with an answer. Not because they're vague, but because they cover quite a lot of ground or whatever. But, like, there's a song on Take Back Heart called Fish King Blues, and I always like that song because I struggle to explain what it's about, but if I said anything, it would probably be celebrating and rejoicing in human fallibility.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's about like, yeah, we're all broken, we're all fucked in our way, but isn't that kind of endearing almost? Do you know what I mean? I mean, of course it's infuriating and awful sometimes, but there is a level on which, you know, the way that human lives repeat themselves. I think this is one of the functions of getting older, is you realise how much everything you've done and every thought you've had has been done many times before by any of the billions of humans that have existed in the past. And some people find that as a frustrating thought, but I find it kind of comforting in a funny way. Do you know what I mean? That like having a dilemma about love or children or work or politics or whatever, these aren't new feelings.
But they feel so personal, and yet they're roads that have been tread before.
Right, yeah. Because, and like, I mean, it would be ridiculous. It is ridiculous for anybody alive at this point in our history to think that they're experiencing and thinking radically new things all day, every day. That's nonsense. Yeah. You know, so I kind of find it, there's something kind of comforting in that.
Yeah, well, there's, this is going to segue into another question, but there's one line of yours that I've kind of used as like my litmus test for like humanity in writing. And for context here, like I try to uplift like the human reality as much as possible in my own show.
Okay.
Like, on air, I'm as vulnerable in myself as I can be. You know, I talk about the things I don't like about myself, and you know, try to put forth the standard that like you aren't meant to be perfect, and you aren't meant to hide the things that that are imperfect about you. But the line of yours that stood out to me is that there's no such thing as rock stars, there's people who play music, and some of them are just like us.
And some of them
are dicks.
Are we allowed to swear on this? Does it matter?
We absolutely can swear.
Okay.
Also, that's not your first time swearing.
It's not, I noticed that, but I was wondering whether I was in trouble for doing that.
Super disappointed.
Yeah. Motherfucker. Yeah, thank you. I like that lyric. It's kind of fun, and I hope it's funny because it's one that loads of people on those occasions when people get pissed off with me for whatever reason, which of course they do because I'm just a sort of idiot human rattling around in the public sphere. Yeah. People kind of try and weaponize that expression and throw it back at me. It's like, oh yeah, I thought some of them were dicks and some of them were just like us, and it's like, yeah, I mean. But like, I'm trying, same as anybody else, you know what I mean?
Well, then I have a follow-up you might like. I talked to Sean Bonnet from Andrew Jackson Duran. We've mentioned...
Is one of the greatest songwriters alive.
Phenomenal fan of his music. He amended your lyric a little bit to say, and some of us are dicks.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting way of being sort of like self-inclusive with those imperfections.
Yeah, I like that.
You're not a dick or not. Like, you're a dick even when you're trying kind of hard not to be. Sometimes you still are. And that's just part of being human.
I like that. Well done, Sean.
Yeah.
Sean, I absolutely love that guy to pieces, but he often crashes at my place in London when they're on tour. And one time just when I was getting together with my partner, he'd stay at my place for a week before a tour just to hang out and be in London. And he, as a sort of thank you, he drew me a picture, and you know what his pictures are like. They're kind of nightmarishly surreal and odd. Yeah. And he drew a picture of a dog with a human head that was crying and pinned it on my fridge. And then my brand new girlfriend came around my house and was like, "What the fuck is that?" I was like, "Oh, that's Sean's drawings, isn't it cool?" And she was like, "Is it? I don't know." So thanks, Sean.
Your refrigerator too.
Yeah. But no, he's a genius, that guy, and that's a great amendment. I might borrow it.
Please do. Well, that kind of leads me to another question: is that like these songs that are from your history that invariably you'll still play on stage? One, do you still agree with them in the way that like you met them when you wrote them? And two, do you consider them sort of time locked, or are they sort of living documents? Are you allowed to amend them?
Well, there are two big questions there. So to the first, so I don't really believe that songs are about anything fixed, and like quite often people say to me, "Tell me what this song is about," and the answer to that is it's about whatever the fuck you think it's about. Like, it's not for me to dictate to any listener what they take from my music, and in a way that act of interpretation is the interesting part of art, you know? And within that, then for me personally, I've written a lot of songs and they come and go from set lists over time, and the moments when I kind of go back to a song, there are times when I get to sort of almost do that interpretation part myself. We were just talking about Trying This at Home. I wrote that song like 10 years ago, you know what I mean? Yeah. And if it sits on the bench for like a couple of years and I come back to it, it's like, oh shit, okay. And I can take different things from it. And in a way, the songs that are more flexible in their meaning are the ones that I find more interesting. The song Love Iron Song has changed 180 degrees what it meant to me from when I first wrote it at one point, and then is now sort of back where it was where I wrote it again. And I think that's kind of fun. I think that's kind of interesting.
Interesting. Since I butchered that at an open mic, I'd love to hear more of that.
Okay, well, it's funny. So when I wrote that song, I wrote it as this utterly, like furiously bitter song. Any part of it that sounds rousing is supposed to be dripping in sarcasm. And then when I first started touring it, I noticed that loads of people were connecting with that song and taking it 100% like at face value and not with the tongue in its cheek at any point. The lines towards the end, it's like, let's be heroes, let's be monsters, let's be radical figures who never have to test drive the leads to their dreams. That is a straight out cuss on anyone who's kind of ideologically motivated in a way. But it's funny because like people sort of started taking that as an inspirational thing, which made me sit down and look at the words again and go, what have I written? Do you know what I mean? And then found value in that interpretation. I thought it was really interesting. And so that's the thing with that song. It just sways from being a sort of sarcastic, pessimistic song to being quite a sort of naive, optimistic song in other places, and I think that's kind of fun. And then the second part of that question, hold on, winding back a bit. So there is something artificial about the fact of recording songs, because I do think songs are organic structures. And I use the word structure advisedly because I think it's quite useful to think of it in terms of if you think about a human skeleton. There is a song obviously has to have something locked that makes it that song, which is a chord sequence and a melody, top line melody and a set of words. Although even within those, obviously there can be variations. But what happens to it beyond that is limitless, And it's in the same way that like I have the bone structure that I have, but I can get fat and I can work out and I can chop an arm off or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's within the sort of preordained architecture, there's an awful lot of room to move around, and like every now and again, particularly the one that always gets me is the song Photosynthesis, because again, I wrote that song like 11, 12 years ago and recorded a long time, and it's probably the song I've played most in my set. And every now and again, for whatever reason, I don't tend to listen to my own records because really
masturbatory maybe.
Yeah, right. But and not least because particularly that's song I play it every day. And occasionally I catch a listen of the original recorded version. And I'm like, oh fuck, that's how we played it back then. And it's kind of funny to me because how that song is how it was last night, which is very different from how it is on the record in terms of its kind of accoutrements. But nevertheless, obviously, when we play it, people in the audience will recognize it and engage with it. But the drum part, the guitar part, like so much of it is moved.
Cool. Well, I know we don't have a lot of time, and I just saw your person rock by.
We're all good.
So I wanted to hit one of our mainstays in our interviews. Like I said, I really love uplifting the sort of human qualities of artists. Do you know what this is?
It's is it how many sided
This
die?
is a D20. It's used
A
to play
D20.
Dungeons and Dragons normally.
So I was Games Workshop nerd when I was a kid.
Really?
Not Dungeons. I was a little young for Dungeons and Dragons, but Games Workshop. I was like, and I'm talking about like Warhammer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a big Warhammer nerd.
That's
In
an
fact,
investment, man.
That's how I got into music. Funnily enough, I was bang into
Gotta follow this
Warhammer.
one.
I was 10 years old, I was banging to Warhammer, and I was playing Warhammer at my friend's house, and his older brother had an Iron Maiden poster on the wall. And I had no idea who Iron Maiden were, but I was into Orcs and Goblins and shit, and I saw Alien, and I was like, that's cool as shit. And my friend said, oh, that's a band. And I was like, what? Like, how? What are you talking about? Band music doesn't look like that. What the fuck? Because prior to that, my parents tend to listen to classical music, and my sister listened to what was on the radio and stuff, and I just didn't really engage with it very much.
Mm.
And he was like, yeah, that's a band. And I was like, you're out of your mind. How could that be a band? And he persuaded me it was true. I told my dad, and my dad, in his last act of parental generosity in my life, and the one he regrets the most, on his way home from work, bought me a copy of Killers on cassette.
Nice.
From from the mini record store at the train station. Imagine that being a thing anymore. And that's why I have the artwork to Killers tattooed in the back of my leg. And I remember vividly putting the cassette in the stereo and pressing play, and Ides of March starts, and I was just like, well, that's me.
Damn.
This is my life. But anyway, so I didn't know how many sides it was, but I recognise this.
Nice. Well, it's funny. One, it's funny that you mentioned Killers because I had, in doing research before, I was excited to find out that Nebraska was one of your first albums, and my dad got me super into Bruce Springsteen when I was young, and it's stayed that way ever since.
Well, I mean, Nebraska was a signpost record for me. It wasn't one of my first records necessarily, but like. And like, it's not just Nebraska. For some, that's kind of on Wikipedia somewhere, I think.
It was somebody's interview.
Yeah. But it's funny, like, I mean, because there was a whole. Essentially, I grew up with metal and then grunge and then punk rock and then hardcore, and I was so buried in that world. And it was weird because I'd never heard a Bob Dylan record or a Springsteen record or a Johnny Cash record or anything. I was just fucking obsessed with New York hardcore and whatever else, straight edge hardcore, and I knew everything about Black Flag or whatever else. And then finally in my mid-20s, my perception of Springsteen was that he was, the traditional singing cheeseburger shit, you know what I mean? And I sort of just hadn't, I'd heard Dancing in the Dark, I think, and I was like, what is this synth pop nonsense? And then someone gave me a copy.
1 minute warning.
Someone gave me a copy of...
See the thumbs up.
Tree, we're having fun.
I love you, man.
It's good. Someone gave me a copy of Nebraska and I listened to it, but it wasn't just that. It was the American recording series by Johnny Cash as well. Bryan Adams' Heartbreaker was a big one for me, and it was just this kind of reveal, first of all, about songwriting. Because I always loved the melodies in Descendant songs and stuff like that, but and it was a purer approach to that, but also. Particularly Johnny Cash and Nebraska, it was the realization that you could be heavy without taking your shirt off and screaming at people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was a huge... It's kind of ridiculous to say now, but in my early 20s, that was like, oh shit, this is a whole new way of thinking about music.
Yeah, in a way, it's like it's the intensity of like telegraphing or not telegraphing your punches. You can land them either way.
Right, yeah. And it was just... I just think that, State Trooper of Nebraska is one of the fucking heaviest songs. It's heavier than Slayer, unquestionably.
Oh, absolutely.
And I had all these Slayer records and I heard that and was like, oh, okay. So, it was a kind of interesting discovery for me.
Nice. And you also mentioned you were straight edge for
it was a long time ago.
I spent about 9 years being straight edge as
Okay,
well.
you got me beat. I have 5.
You got 5?
I do have a straight edge tattoo.
Do you? You got me beat. I think I knew I was.
Do you know what this is at the top?
No Spiritual Surrender?
Do you know what that's from?
No, tell me.
It's from a band called Inside Out. They're a straight edge band from New York, whose singer was one Zach De La Rocha.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was a singer in a straight edge band before he joined Rage Against the Machine.
How about that?
Yeah. And the first tour I ever did, which was 20 years ago this summer, the band that we were touring with used to cover that song in their set every night, and I'd get up and sing vocals on it. So that was my first ever tour tattoo.
Nice. Okay, so first drink after being straight edge.
But you know what brought my names was weed actually.
Really?
I was, and it's a terrible story. I was I was in this. You know when you've got a friend, right, who's got a girlfriend and they just break up and get back together and have screaming fights in the bar, and everybody else is like, Jesus Christ.
Again.
I was that guy, right, for about 3 years when I was at university in London, and this girl, who, God bless her, she's a sweet human, but we're not destined to be a couple. And we used to kind of, have screaming matches and then have like raucous sex and makeup and all the rest of it. And it had just gone on so long, and I was on the sort of downswing of this nonsense, and I was hanging out with my friend John, who just went, "Oh, would you shut the fuck up and put a spliff in my mouth?" And I took one hit on it, and then we were on a roof of a cinema, and I very nearly fell off the roof. That was what broke my edge. After which I went through a brief and intense period of drinking Alka-Pops, which I'm like with Smirnoff Ice and shit. It's a terrible look. Yeah. I didn't know any better.
That's all right. I think it's one of those historical things. You know what you know at the time. You make the best decisions you can, and at that point it was not that much information.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this thing, I have a list of 20 questions that are humanizing questions, as I would call them. I don't like my listeners thinking of artists as only artists. I like to remind them that they're people. They have a favorite pizza flavor. They have a favorite TV show, that kind of thing. So
I'm going to roll this.
Give that thing a toss, and I'm
going to roll it on the floor.
Absolutely, Kirk will get a shot of it.
Crit
fail!
Confirm it.
No, it's good. So
these things are so cool.
Oh my god, I was so mean when I first wrote this.
Do you start out with like a 6-sided die and write 6 shitty questions and then start adding?
I mean, like I've got like sub questions in here. But okay, all right. So I think I retired my worst one. But let's see. All right, what is something that either you love and everyone else hates, or that you hate and everyone else loves?
That's a good question. I mean, I can sort of I can answer that on several different levels. One thing that brings to mind immediately, and this doesn't really go to the humanizing part because we're back in music territory, but fuck it.
You just play music?
It's true. It's just that it's funny. If you drew up a list of what my most popular songs are versus what I think are the best songs I've written, there's not massive correlation between the two. Now, I like all the songs 95% of the songs I've written, and if people fucking love a song and want to hear it every night, then I love playing it. But like from a really kind of technical, intellectual point of view, like I think Broken Piano is probably the best song I've ever written. No one gives a fuck about that song. Like you know, they might now, but like Broken Piano, King for a Horse, you know, my list of what my favorite songs that I've written is just doesn't sync very well necessarily all the time, which I find interesting. And I'm sure that other songwriters have the same thing. I'm sure that like Born to Run probably isn't Springsteen's favorite song that he's written. You know what I mean? And it's just it's about that sort of clash between your own sort of perception and taste and other people's, and arguably each is as important as the other. Beyond that, I mean, we have arguments on the tour bus all the time because one of my favorite things. And I might add, I've found an ally in this on this tour. My buddy Derek Zanetti, the Homeless Gospel Choir.
Oh, we're hanging out with him next.
Okay, right. So ask Derek about this. Right. So I love Hershey's chocolate, right? And everybody else in my band is like, that shit is rat shit and it's disgusting. But not only Hershey's chocolate, you know, get the packs of mini bags and shit. I put them in the freezer on the bus, and eating little squares of frozen Hershey chocolate is my absolute fucking heaven. Like, when I die, I'm going to be in a hot tub that's full of margarita with salt around the edge and a packet of frozen Hershey's. And like,
that's some people's hell, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is the thing. Everybody else in my band and crew is like, you're fucking disgusting. What are you doing? And this is, I've been doing this for years on tour. I found out, I sort of worked it out. I was like, yeah, this is great. And then on this tour, one day on the tour, Derek opened the freezer thing and was like, somebody freezing Hershey bars on this fucking bus, and I got so ready for a fight about it, do you know what I mean? Because I thought he was going to be like negative about it. I was like, yeah, and what fucking of it, man? And he was like, this is the greatest thing of all time. And started like, guzzling them, and I was like, I found an ally.
What a thing to bond over.
Yeah, it's great. So, and the people who think that, try it at home. Try putting a little Hershey bar in the freezer. Eat that shit. Yeah, it's great.
Cool, man. Well, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with us. I want to endear myself to your tour manager. So next time I actually get to record your music.
I'm having a great time, and I'm sorry that we have to cut the short. It's LA show day.
No worries, man. Well, hey, next time you're in town, let's pick up a guitar.
Let's do it properly. Yeah, sorry, it's been a limited day, but we'll do it properly.
No, I'm super happy we got this time, man. Thank you for being so forthright with me. Thanks for being a part of A Fistful of Vinyl. We wanted to record you for like 7 years. We did it.
Stay in touch, man. Seriously.
I absolutely will. I really appreciate also that you answer your own emails. I don't know very many artists at your level that do that.
You know, I do. It's because I'm a Henry Rollins obsessive, and Henry Rollins does it. Therefore, I do it too.
DIY or die, baby.
Yeah, right. Cool. No, but stay in touch, like I say, and like the next time, like with a bit more lead up and blah blah and the rest of it, we can sort of proper thing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, here I want to. We also homemade some stickers.
Ooh.
We take these, and You're a large t-shirt?
Medium or large, depending on how they run.
How about large skinny fit?
Oh yeah, that's me.
There it is, baby. Alright.
Yeah, because that's the thing, because I'm long and thin.
Yeah, so we home make our t-shirts with a stencil. Which one of these designs speaks to you the most? Will you actually wear it if you...
Yeah, absolutely.
Alright, cool.
The blue one, absolutely.
Blue one?
Yeah, is that?
That is fair game. It's a medium, but it's a big medium.
Thank you so much. Man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you guys.
It's been an
Thanks
absolute
for having
pleasure.
us. That's an awesome t-shirt. I love that. I'm gonna
Absolutely,
have a lot.
man.
Cool. Wicked. Right, I'm gonna run do more interviews. I'll see you
Absolutely.
again.
Just, like, as long as you accept the couple jokes at that point,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you get to benefit from being the same
I'm
size.
happy. I'm happy. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah, similar style, but he's a head and shoulders taller than I am.
Okay.
So it's unfortunate. If you cut off the bottom third of the shirt, I can wear it.
It's like, it means you can tell who's a suit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How are we?